Time for another episode of One Nation presented by Tony Bet.
Come on.
It's a two-man show today. Jordan Wilson and Adam Jenkins here with you. Close enough that we can clean the dandruff off each other's shoulders.
Nah, that's in the dirt off your shoulder, baby.
So I was like,
Dandruff?
I was self-conscious.
No dandruff.
Get some Head and Shoulders sponsorship on this show. We're here with a laptop today, and it's like revisiting family memories or memories with family at a gathering now. It's like you go for Thanksgiving, and everyone's like, look at these.
Show the laptop?
Laptop. The reason we're doing that is despite all of the chaos, and let's call it chaos, or hectic news in the world of Canadian soccer lately, we did have a pretty special moment.
Absolutely, we did. Talk about it.
It was match 500 in Canadian Premier League history.
Can you say 500 for me?
500?
Yeah, that's decent. I like that.
I did some number crunching because I remember you asked me a little while ago how many matches of those 500 I've called. You want to guess?
I would say you're rolling deep at 240.
249.
Oh!
So just about every other match.
If it was what Price is Right, do I win? Because I was under, no?
Yeah, because you didn't go over. We should have asked.
Yeah,
operators to
we should have
given you a prize.
So nearly half.
Nearly half. And since
Machine.
since 2021, it's 57% since 2021.
You picked up after the bubble.
That's right.
Like that's when it was like
Once
prime time.
that bubble popped, baby. It was
Prime time, Jenko. You're the voice of the CPL, brother.
So
I'd love to hear you.
We have me here as the man who's called every other game in CPL history factually, and you as someone who has played in the Canadian Premier League. And we're going to go through and roll through some clips. Now, that's what's on the laptop, so Jordan and I are going to play 13 of them, which is ambitious.
I like it.
Especially because we've talked so long to start this show. So let's dive into it with our first memory that we want to revisit. And we're going to start at the very beginning, Jordan. April 27th, 2019.
Yes.
It was the first match in CPL history. It was York 9. Forge, Tim Hortons Field. Where were you on this day? Do you remember?
I was in Denmark, but I remember hearing about it. I didn't get to watch it, but when you see Manny Aparicio turn there, playing Ryan Telfer in, I remember just seeing the crowd, right? I don't know how many were there, but definitely I want to say north of 15,000. Like there was a lot of people at that stadium that day, and I said, this is just the beginning of Canadian soccer. You'd love to see it. Was it 1-1 draw?
1-1 draw. Telfer scores. Cadell Thomas scores. I was cutting this game for the CBC. I was an associate producer there and at Sportsnet. And I remember being assigned this match as the web editor for it and still trying to figure out what the CPL was, what it was going to become. And when you consider where the league has been and where we are now, like, what do you think of the longevity of it? Like, when you heard the news, what was your forecast? What was your prediction for what this league might turn into?
I know there are a lot of people that didn't think 500 would come. I was optimistic that it would, but when you have a pandemic as well, you're just blessed to see that it actually sustained. But look at the quality of football now. You're looking at the Becker there. Young Becker had a little bit more hair in the picture. But just the league and the players that have come in, have left, have come back, players that have gone on to go and play for the national team and whatever it might be. But how important this league was at that time, I never thought in 2019 that would be where it is right now in 2024.
Sitting in one of those dugouts, and this is a story that Jimmy Brennan and I will tell someday. My mortal enemy from 2019.
Now you got the best buds.
Did not get along, and now we're two peas in a pod. But it's funny to look back on not knowing who the man was other than his resume, to the relationship we developed, the frenemies we became, and now the fact that we're inseparable in the broadcast booth. Number 2 is a match that was almost rivaled a couple of weeks ago in the TELUS Canadian Championship.
It was close.
Jordan Wilson, we were getting there.
It was close.
Valor 0, Cavalry 8 is where we want to head next. IG Field, pour one out for the turf that is no more. The goals came early. They came often. Ledgerwood, Pasquati. My favorite thing about this is just the names. I always loved looking back at the old rosters, the old footage. This was a tough day for the Winnipeggers.
All I know about Pasquati is what a throw-in this man had. He would whip that. I think Wheel said it was illegal, and he's probably right, but this guy it was literally like a corner. But yeah, just looking at the kits, the players that play in this league, look at Tommy Wheeler Jr. shaking his head. Like, this is just a squad, but a shellacking that they gave Valor on the day.
How does 8-0 happen?
Man, it goes from bad to worse. I think after 3, you have to look at your partners, you have to look at your teammates and say, no more, cut it out. Obviously, Valor didn't do that on the day. But let's move on.
Let's move on. Okay, well, we'll go to something much happier, much more closely contested. The 2019 Canadian Premier League final. I was the sideline reporter for Leg 1.
Okay.
They didn't think I was going to be very good because they didn't book me a ticket for Leg 2 of the final. So I didn't actually see the final. I watched it on my parents' couch while everyone else was at Cavalry. I heard something about an open bar after the game. Not bitter about it still. Let's start with Leg 1. Cavalry Forge. They were starting to build that rivalry. How many times are we going to see this at Tim Hortons Field? I remember being right between the benches for it when chaos ensued. Joel Waterman sent off, shown a red, and then this save from Marco Carducci. Short-haired Marco Carducci, by the way.
Business. Was it in or was it out? The formerly retired Chris Nanko doing his business here. But you see names like Leisure, look at Borges. I mean, the way he struck that ball, we just saw that a couple of weeks ago here. And then looking, I think there's a Chouanier as well to put it away at Atco Field. But still these big names in the league, right? Like these are the pillars. These are the players that you really build the league on. Seeing also a young, handsome Dom Zator there, I can't help but shout out my boy and the center back partner. But yeah, this is this is just one of those times, right? This is where the rivalry was really kicking into gear for sure.
I think we can also share the story. I'm not going to play the whole thing back, but the first North Star Shield, the plate that now is part of CPL lore, they had to make a second one because it was not bilingual. So when you look at Forge's trophy cabinet, and that's the reason I'm comfortable saying is because it's still there.
Yes.
The first one is just Canadian Premier League, and then from 2020 and onwards, they realized that this is a national league, and they needed to put both, and it was corrected, and then it was obviously improved upon. And we're going to get to the fact that there is more hardware later on in the show. But 2019, Forge wins. Cavalry will never see Joel Waterman again because he goes on and signs for Montreal. And what was your reaction to that? Because that was the first, like, okay, the pipeline is here. They go on, they beat the Whitecaps at BC Place. There's all these things happening. And then Joel Waterman gets plucked and he hasn't looked back.
The first thing I thought about was how many more Joel Watermans were there before the Canadian Premier League. This is what I thought about. Like, I had to go to Timbuktu, Denmark. There are so many players that have to go to another country to try and play and have something professional, have something sustainable, make a name for themselves. How many people could really go the high school MLS route, right straight, especially back then? I'm talking
Trinity
10,
Western
15.
University.
Like his come up is like quality player, but it was very unorthodox. But I love that the CPL came in and he was able to go and play and under Tommy Wheeldon's tutelage and just develop his game. And now look at him. You look at him as a regular, even just playing in Can Champs the other day. Like he's a mainstay for CF Montreal.
Number 5 of 13, as we walk down memory lane, is just called Pandemic.
Man, I can't wait to see this
Shudders.
B-roll. Man. It's just a time in my life I don't need to revisit. I feel like the world feels this way, but in terms of football and getting the thing jabbed up my nose and getting tested, like, man, you don't need this. So for me, PEI, where was I during this time? I was on a plane coming back home. I recently just moved from my team in Denmark, thinking that maybe I'd go away.
The virtual stadium, never forget, by the way.
Yes, but which I think apparently it wasn't as good as it looked on TV. Like, I think there was, like it looked really bad live. But regardless, this is probably the first time that I watched CPL games religiously was this little bubble here.
So this PEI, obviously the first one. When you came into the league, then, and we're gonna dive into that deeper. But you also kind of started in the bubble because we had the kickoff.
Yeah.
In Winnipeg, I heard something about
the kickoff.
Scrambled eggs and potatoes or something to that.
I mean, if that's what you want to call it. I'll say this: I left and I was a little bit overweight. I wasn't match fit yet, and I came back and my mother said, "What happened to you?" It was 36 days. What happened? Man, my jawline was cut. The six-pack was packing. I was ready, and it wasn't because of the 8 games in 36 days. It was because of the nutrition. We were starved. we were borderline starved, but I digress. I made it. We made it. And it's always going to be that story that we look back on. I don't need to go to Winnipeg again. It's okay. I just remember the bubble, and man, that was a tough time.
Were you surprised the league survived? Were you worried at any point?
I was worried. But after making it through the 2021 bubble and even just having the kickoff, which all jokes aside, obviously it's great to have everyone together and then go back to their respective markets later and then finish that season. But 2021 was fun. It's a fun season with 4 teams making the playoffs, just like competitive games. I really enjoyed my time. And I know players around the league as well. It's something to always refer to.
One of my memories from it is like any other industry, any other job, we were trying to figure out as One Soccer what we were doing, how to do it. So we, of course, had our content at home. We were doing the daily meetings. We at one point had Jim Corsi on as a guest for our show, which I think there were a few hockey fans in our group that were happy about it. Others were like, we've really, we're running out of things to talk about because we didn't see an end in sight. A story I will share that I got in trouble for, rightfully so at the time. During the pandemic, I went home. My best friend grew up on a farm. I was helping out on the farm because it was just something to do during the day and I couldn't really see anyone else. So I was driving tractors and I was picking rocks, and we decided to do a pre-production call where we get on, we talk about the show, what we want to do. So I'm sitting in this tractor in a field, picking rocks, bouncing around, and I accidentally unmuted and turned on my camera. So my colleagues are trying to have a professional meeting, and here I am in a tractor, probably listening to country music in the background.
This is great.
Producer Kyle is not a big fan of that, and we had some conversations about it. But now we can laugh about it because it was so long ago. The pandemic, what a time, what memories we had. We teased it. Jordan Wilson returns to the Canadian Premier League. Look at this handsome devil with that shirt beaming ear to ear. York 9 Football Club. What was the sales pitch?
You know what it was? Honestly, I was getting ready to go on trial with Forge. I knew Jelani Smith. Obviously, this is a big team. And I remember they had a little COVID situation within the squad, and I couldn't go out and train. But then a week later, Angus McNabb called me. And I knew Roger Thompson just from growing up and playing with him. And I said, go to Forge and basically maybe play 70% of the time, or go to York, and I never really saw the squad. It was going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
I said, man, I'll take the challenge. I'll take York. Let's go and get things started. And that was in October. We didn't play again until June. But I'm so glad I did because I didn't think my career would end in 2 years. But it was full at York. There was so much that happened, having to play a leadership role. I feel like Forge was already set. They had their guys. Of course, I would have played a factor. I'm sure of that, in terms of being a positive guy in the locker room, but it wouldn't have had that same impact like I did at York. At York, I was the big brother. They still refer to me as Unc, which I kind of take on the shoulder. I don't think I'm that much older than them, but I'm Uncle Jordan. But yeah, it was just a great time, the 2 years I spent there.
So famously, Angus McNabb helped land Jesse Marsh and Jordan Wilson.
That's what he did.
That's what he did.
The duo.
That is his legacy.
I like that I'm in the same conversation with Marsh. I love that you did that, Jenko.
What were you expecting when you came here? Obviously you had some idea of the league, and I think anyone who's from here that saw the CPL existed was seeing highlights or following on socials and kind of had an idea. And you know people playing.
For sure.
So your expectations versus the reality of playing for 2 seasons.
I knew there were ballers in the league. I just didn't think it would be as competitive as it was. I didn't think the bottom, so the 23rd player on the roster, would be a guy that I'm oh, he can do bits, he can do damage. And even when I explain it, my friends are oh, how's the league going? How are things? I'm man, every week I don't get a break. There's not oh, I'm gonna go against this striker. Even dare I say it at the time, a lower team. I know York was always middle of the pack, but if you're going and playing Valor, there's still a guy that can hurt you, or whoever Halifax at the time. There's still players that you have to watch out for, Morelli, which we'll get into in a little bit.
Yeah.
But there are always players that can hurt you, and I think that's the beauty of Canada. There's so many players that are eager, so many different nationalities, so many different backgrounds. When you come together in an 8-league team that we hope will grow, there's just so much quality within this nation.
Is the travel as bad as it seems? There's just everyone.
Not for us. I mean, I think if you ask the Halifax and the Pacific, I think they get it obviously the worst. But I love being at airports. I love traveling. It is something different though compared. And you find the foreigners that come into this league. Or even we had Daniil Henry here as well. He's just man, that travel's serious. Because it is. You go in different time zones. It's tough. I think the league do a really good job as, okay, you're going West Coast, so you're going to play Pacific, and you're going to play Vancouver FC. That does help. But when you get to a point where you can actually split it up East and West, that will be a significant help to the players.
Are you getting the miles, or is that going to some team managers?
You know what? I didn't even use my miles, WestJet. I goofed. I think I've passed the 2 years of statute of limitations. So, yeah, I should have given them to you.
You should have. And speaking of statute of limitations, the Labor Day Classic, because Jordan was naughty. He was a naughty boy. This was one of 2 matches where York and Jimmy Brennan got poured rain on. What a game this was, an absolute thriller. I think this is still, aside from a final because of the stakes, my favorite match I've ever called. That one's a pen. I was worried when I met you because I was not easy on you because of what we're about to see. Which
no, that is not a pen. Usually, you did me so dirty. I wish there was a replay. Oh my goodness. Even Morelli, when he grabbed the ball from me, he said he called it. He said he called it already. He's not going to change his mind. Then that madness this upset me.
Oh, the post.
This was just, and it was a flick on header by Ozzy Ramirez, which I didn't forgive him for about a week. But it was one of those situations we got spared. We were going to win 3-2, but it ended up being 3-3. And then after the fact, I'm not going to lie, in the back of my head, there was always this, when I retire, I want to get into media. You spoke about it and you told me, you were probably one of the first people to say.
We had live chats about this.
Yeah, you're look, if it's time for you to go into this, I think you would thrive. And I was thinking, I was so grateful to be a part of that, but even on the airplane, even once we touched down in Toronto, I was still livid. Usually, I had words for him after. Usually, I love you, brother. We've gotten over it. But at that time, the second pen, I couldn't believe it, man.
Producer Ellie wants to know where your right back was on the play.
Christopher Ensa, look, I love him to bits, and he has all the potentials to be a top-notch right back. But because he's so good, because he's so fast, he can get out of position sometimes because he can make it up. And on a rainy day in Halifax, he left me to dry a little bit. However, I still didn't touch him. What's it with Stefanovic or whatever his name is? Great dive, but for me, I was so upset. I couldn't believe it. I'm still upset.
Clearly, aside from the wet, what was the locker room like after that?
Quiet, because you know what it was? I'm usually smiling, and of course I have my moments where I'm yelling at my teammates, trying to galvanize and get the group together. But I'm usually honest about my play.
Yeah.
And so I said I gave up the first pen, but to have the second one given. I was so upset, so everyone knew not to even talk to me. Even on the airplane, I'm usually at that, that's 3 hours later, you're over it. I was livid. I'm if someone ran over my foot or someone looked at me the wrong way, I think I was gonna fight. I was ready to go. My blood was boiling that day.
Did you see Usuri after the game?
You know what? Funny enough, this is why I said he's my brother. Usuri told me a week later, he was the fourth official. I think we played at Forge, and he said, I got that one wrong. And I said, well, thank you for saying that. It doesn't change much.
No, I'm still livid. But
I still think you messed up thoroughly, Usuri. But it was nice to just have that dialogue. Yeah. And I really did have that with a lot of referees in terms of red cards or decisions. I remember Scott Bowman as well gave me a red against Calvary. We spoke about it a week later. He's like, I made the wrong decision. And he found out, he's like, I just gave you an extra week with your new baby and fiance. So I said, thank you for that.
Thank you, Scott Bowman.
Thank you, Scott.
2021 final is where we'll go next. Look who has the ball, Jordan. Look who has the ball. It's Usuri Rudolph, the most appointed referee in CPL history. We're at Tim Hortons Field, Forge going in like they have done every single year, but Alessandro Hojabrpour on a corner from Johnny Dos Santos. This was, I honestly think, the first CPL game I called in person.
Really?
I am.
I remember you walking into the studio. This was my first day, I guess, big moment for media in terms of I was there with Wheels and Ollie. They were showing me the ropes of match day, and I remember freezing. My long johns were soaked, but I remember you looking dapper, coming early like you always do. But what a call, what a game. Hojabrpour getting that header. I remember probably the only person pissed about that was Max Ferrari.
Yep.
He probably should have had U21 Player of the Year that year, but Hojabrpour showed up on the finals, and I like this story because this is the first team to really...
Still the only non-Forge...
First and only team to really
winner.
give it to them, stick it to them at the time. And, but great scenes.
I had a bad teammate move in this game. So when you broadcast from the stadiums, you had the windows generally. And based on the conditions that we can see and the fact that you guys had your horrible umbrellas.
It was hail, sleet, rain, it was everything.
I asked the A2, we call him, the audio operator in the booth that sets up our microphones and our board and everything, to open the window because I wanted to hear the noise. And they said, how much? And I was with them, but I wasn't sort of in position to do the commentary. I learned as soon as they were done that they opened it right in front of Ian Hume, and I was sheltered by my pane of glass. Hume is just getting pelted with hail and rain, and he just looked miserable the entire game, and I'm just bopping in my cover. The story here, one of the stories here, is Pamadou Ka. I remember how...
Yes.
I'm going to go on and say, he was on the wrong side of arrogant, bordering on cocky before the game, and no one really understood why. He obviously knew what was going to happen.
Crazy.
He is honestly, he is the one, I think, of all the people that have come and gone, that I wish we could have had 1 or 2 more years of, because his impact.
Yeah.
I still think I would love to know how far he was considered in the Canadian men's national team coaching search. I rate him that highly. His ability to work with players, he's demanding, but he is an excellent coach, and just a masterclass for him in this game.
That image of him and Jamar Dixon crying in each other's arms at the end of the match, just seeing what it means, and then knowing Jamar's title now with Pacific and the work that he's doing, that doesn't happen. And Pamadou Ka even said it to me. That doesn't happen without Jamar Dixon being a mainstay and being a captain and leading their team to something, right? With the North Star Shield at the time, North Star Cup, forgive me.
North Star Cup now.
North Star Cup now.
Yeah.
And at that time was just Shield.
Yeah.
Got it. So, yeah, I think that was just beautiful scenes. It was a time that I'm glad I was there live in the flesh. But I remember thinking, just whistling, is York going to win one of these days? But hopefully that happens.
And then you retired, and now you'll never know.
And now I'll never know. I'll know. I'll be excited if it does happen. I just, Yeah, I'll be on the outside looking in.
That's right. We're always winners. We don't.
Hey.
It's the one thing about the media game is we win every.
We win
single
all the
year.
time.
Obviously, the notable one, Jabberpur scores and then goes. See you later. Ian Campbell off to Hamilton. What I remember seeing that, and like I got a text probably about an hour before the news dropped, and I just remember being in Kingston, like, what on earth is going on? Wow. That's neither here nor there, but it's definitely an interesting one. But hey, they delivered them the championship, so at least they left with a gift. This was not a gift. Number 9, William Accio, Alessandro Rigi, looking to score against his former side. Accio clears it off the line. This was back in the good old days of One Soccer where I was all by my lonesome in the commentary booth trying to make sense of this. I still don't know what happened. Willie has obviously spoken about it, and I think he probably didn't look at his phone for about a month for good reason. It's still shocking every time.
I've never received more messages in my life.
Right.
Than this moment. Look, and this is from someone who's recently been married and had a son. That means nothing. Denmark, England, everyone hit me up and said, what happened here? And bless Willie, I don't want to go in on him.
No.
It happens.
Yes.
I just never seen it happen like that.
Yeah.
I've never seen it happen like that. That day, your boots, you got to burn them. You got to literally just have a whole sage ceremony. Just get rid of the bad juju. I don't know what happened, but in 10 years' time, I'll look at it and still not understand. But poor guy. I will say, after the fact, he's leaned into it, owned it, and almost in ways, you forget about it, right?
Yeah.
Until you see it again, I'm like,
And you will, and that's the problem with it for him, unfortunately. Like, it's good that he's able to laugh about it now. Like, Barstool picked it up. It was on every football account. I'm selfishly like, this is great. I'm so famous.
Literally,
right now.
your voice was. People were sending. I'm not even kidding. Everywhere, my teammates from Denmark, people I know from England, France, everywhere said, "What is going on? What happened?" I said, "Man, he thought, I don't know. He thought he was in on goal. Like I have no words."
All-time gaff for Willie, but he's scoring again for Cavalry now in the CPL, and with his new club, we just can share that memory and laugh about it now. Jordan, laughing about this at the audacity, Balutabla bicycle kick into the shadows, bar down, Carducci flopping, trying to keep it out. Best goal in CPL history?
I think so, but I can't help but watch this and laugh because my son was sleeping at the time. A little nap, and I remember he couldn't really go down, and I yelled, I said, Father God, literally. My lady looked at me, I looked down, I was just praying, I said, please don't wake up. Thankfully he didn't, but I screamed because that was outrageous. It's not just a bike, Adam Jenkins, and you know.
It's very much not a bike. I did call this one. Me and Jimmy Brennan, I believe.
Look, it's not, and I remember, so what a goal that was. That was Jimmy, for sure.
That's Jimmy after
that was Jimmy,
goals.
but this one, you should have put something different, Gaff. You should have threw some, because that is audacious to the on top of the box.
Yeah.
No prep touch.
Nope.
It's coming in. Dangerous finish. He's a bad man, Balutabla.
One of my favorite moments from that is at the CPL Awards that year. Carducci, I think it was the first time that Carducci had seen Balu since the goal. And he just they were talking about it. He shook his hand and he just shook his head still. Like, I can't believe you beat me on that one. Like, fair play to him. And it was sad in some ways because that weekend was the last we thought we would see of Balutabla because he left for Turkey. And then he came back. And he's fitting back in that super team. Where do you think he ranks or will rank by the time he's done as talents to come into this league?
It's tough, right? Because I think when you come with, just quickly, when you want to categorize players, like a Morelli, for me, will always be at the top just because for what he did for that city and that club and the consistency. But Balu, based off of talent and even playing against him, he's one of the players. I would like to say I wasn't the most talented, but I usually got close to certain players.
Right.
Like on a day, kick Becker, kick Borges, like all those guys, like they're top-notch players. But on the day, I'm like, yeah, I could get closer, maybe get the better of them in some way, shape, or form. Balu, if he snapped his fingers and really wanted to, he's just a guy you can't really touch. You can't tackle. Like, he can always get the best of you at some point in the game. And so for me, I don't, right now he's at top 3. Like Morelli, I'm putting up there. There's probably someone I'm forgetting deep down, but Balu's right now top 3. And you're looking at this league in 10 years' time, In terms of quality, he has to be at the top.
Well, and it's one of the reasons why Ottawa was so confident going into the final. They're at home. I remember the day. We were there for that one as well. My favorite moment of the entire day, walking through the concourse with Jimmy Brennan. He wanted a slice of pizza before the game. I was getting recognized. He was not. And that made me feel incredibly, incredibly good about it.
Oh, how the tides have turned.
The tables have shifted. But what a night. What scenes. Forge, they go on the road. They bounce back after losing at home. They return it. Shout out the red shorts for Atletico Ottawa. Still think this is their best ever look.
Good kid.
They come in regular season winners. They've been given their CPL shield now retroactively, but Forge, man, undeniable again in 22.
Man, big moments. Forge a step up, but for me, this was just a moment where I think how many thousand were there that day? It was a 15.
I want to say it was at
shy?
least 15,000.
Like it was close 15K. I remember just feeling it the way we were behind a certain goal and just looking on both sides, and it was packed. And I said, look how far we've come. Like this league, CPL, the fact that it's in existence at that time was that fourth season.
Yeah.
I was just like, this is what we can do when we kind of just mash hands together, right? And there's no question that there's so much talent within this country. When you put it all together, like this is what you get. That moment, I was like, obviously Forge are the benefactors on the day, but it's just everything coming together. Like even us having the bar night before and having the panel. Just all talking about footy. I was like, this is beautiful. This is what I've always wanted, and I'm so glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, Glebe Central Pub that night was a ton of fun. I shattered a glass of Guinness before we even started the panel, and they gave me another one, and I was proud of them, and I thanked them very, very much.
Shattered on purpose.
That was also the last time we would ever see the North Star Shield, because Mark Noonan would come in the next season fully at the helm from the beginning, and one of the things that the new commissioner would do is institute trophies. This was the CPL Shield being awarded for the very first time, the dominant season for Cavalry, and the scenes, especially because it was at Spruce Meadows, the weather was perfect. The only downside was they needed a stronger adhesive for their sign, but otherwise we had this, and this is still my favorite. Akio is like lashing Tommy Wheeldon. This is still my favorite part of the entire clip.
Oh, it's great.
Tommy didn't feel it an inch, I'm sure, because he was so excited, but just what do you think about how special that regular season team was?
13 points. Look, we want to talk about Akio real quick. If there's a time to whip your manager, right? If you get out anytime you started me on the bench or if you didn't see eye to eye, you just got a couple hits in. All jokes aside, 13 points, that team. Things went their way in terms of picking points up at the right time. Yeah. But Tommy Wheeldon Jr., being on the other side of when he's coach, he has his team organized and chipping away, but he got everything right that year. Pushing them in the right direction, having that hybrid brand of pressing and suffocating teams, but then also lulling them to sleep with that tiki-taka football. And I loved it because normally, I was saying last year, you always get a team like Calgary that will maybe outmuscle you. Right. But they outsmarted teams as well in moments and showed up big. So it just took the league in general to another plateau. So for me, 2023 is a year that Tommy Wheeldon Jr. and Calgary would always want to replay. But the beauty in sports, can you go and do it again?
That's right. Well, we saw these scenes. The season ended, Cavalry cruising into the postseason. With the new playoff format, they hosted Forge, the winner of that game, and they hosted Forge because of a tiebreaker that has since been changed, because they could have hosted and perhaps should have hosted the Halifax Wanderers. We don't have time for that conversation. But Forge goes on and beat them. And I remember being upset because I wanted to go to Calgary for the final. Fair. But I'm glad we didn't because of the game we saw at Tim Hortons Field. It was a little bit of a snoozy one. Let's call it for what it is through 90 minutes. Extra time comes, and I thought Moosey won it.
I thought so too. I mean, this moment, this magic, all year you're asking him to step up big, and he did. But the counter to that is Forge having big dogs and big players. For me, Benny Bedebanga, look at this man. Who's always so cool, calm, and collected, right? Throwing out his shoulder. Benny just tearing up the stadium.
Literally destroying the stadium.
Literally, and then this.
Oh, the Olympico.
I've watched this probably 20 times, and I'm like, you can't hit it cleaner.
No.
If Tristan Borges hits that with any less tempo, Trafford's getting to it, Carducci's getting to it. He has to whip it with that much pace, and that is not easy to do. I could try that 100 times on the right side, and I'm maybe getting one. And I don't think I'm that much worse than Borges, but that is just how sweet of a strike that is. And so scenes, and finally a home team winning on home soil, the last match of the season. And this is when you had the bunny hop as well. I want to go and show. This was incredible. Yeah. You got some airtime on that. You're jumping. cruising. And
Jimmy
Jim
not
was there
reacting
stoic,
at all.
Like, oh, he's like, but you know what it was? It comes down to Jimmy usually has the nicest left foot. And he realized Tristan Borges hit that. He said, man, I don't think I've done that in my career. He thought about it. He said, he's like, Tristan has one up on me.
At
What a strike.
Olympico in extra time
To win it.
the final at home against your bitter rival.
Hard to beat that.
Brilliant. And the North Star Cup looked sexy. It did. It looked so good, and many a pints were consumed from that trophy. And you just have to wonder who's going to drink from it this year. Who do you think right now on the spot?
On the spot, I have to pick Forge.
Oh, coward.
I have to.
Coward. Atletico Ottawa's looking damn good.
Oh,
If they get Forge again. Anyways, this has been a revisit through CPL 500. Here's to 500 more, Jordan Wilson.